Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the continuation meeting for the Durham OSAC Opioid Settlement Advisory Committee. My name is Shalisa Howard Martinez. I'm the community-based representative for the group, and I also co-chair the committee along with Brittany Price. We want to do just a real quick round of introductions again for all the committee members. So if you could please just share your name and your organization, and then we will get started with our meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Brittany.
Hi, I'm Brittany Price. I'm a co-chair along with Shalisa, and I am in the healthcare payer funder seat. I work for University of Washington and run evaluations on several national funding opportunities. And I will pass it to Dawn.
Hello, I'm Dawn Baxton, Chief Public Defender for Durham County. I'll pass it to Dr. Carter.
Hey, I'm Jamie Carter. I work at Lincoln Community Health Center doing primary care and addiction medicine, and I will pass it to Karen.
Hey everybody, I'm Karen Kelly. I'm the Chief Program Officer at TROSA, and I'll pass it to Commissioner Jacobs.
Hi everyone, I am Wendy Jacobs, County Commissioner, and I am serving on the elected official position role. And I'll pass it to Paul.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Paul Nagy, OSAC board member and member of the clinical faculty at Duke and Department of Psychiatry as a licensed counselor and licensed addiction specialist. And I don't know who's going, so I don't know who to pass to.
I think Lofton is
Brittany?
left. Oh, Lofton, I think, is left.
Oh, okay. Lofton then.
Thank you, Paul. I'm Lofton. I work for the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition at the Durham Community-Based Student Service Program, and I serve in the OSAC seat for person with lived experience with opioid use disorder. And I think everybody has gone.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and look at our agenda. This is a continuation agenda from our last couple of meetings. Let me see, I can pull it up. So we've had the meeting called to order. Are there any announcements? Okay. So this is our amended agenda. So we need to vote to accept the amended agenda. We'll do a voice vote. So I'll start first with just again going around the room with Brittany.
Yes.
Dawn,
Yes.
Dr. Carter,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
and Paul,
Yes.
and Lofton.
Yes.
And I vote yes. So the committee has accepted the amended agenda. We are now going to move to the conflict of interest policy. The reason why we're having this discussion is because we want to make sure that we are applying the conflict of interest policy consistently. That has been something that may have not happened in the past with the committee. And so before today's meeting, everyone received the code of ethics for Durham County for appointed and also elected officials. We wanted to make sure that everyone understood as we go through the recommendations for funding that again, we're applying this policy consistently. So we wanted to propose to the group that as we go through this discussion around recommended applicants and strategies, that as if a member has a conflict of interest with a specific application, that they recuse themselves from voting on that application. And so we wanted to make sure that everyone in the committee agreed, or if not, we could definitely discuss this. So are there any questions about the conflict of interest, the proposed policy around conflict of interest and this process? Yes. Go ahead, Paul.
I just have one question and hopefully somebody on the call can clear this up. And maybe I should have been clear about it sooner. I kind of looked through the policy and I looked through it, previously and had the class. I don't know how to put this, but I wondered about, in my situation, it's more of a retro conflict. In other words, a past history that suggests you have some, understanding of an organization at a level perhaps others don't. And for that reason, I would recuse myself because I don't want to, it's making maybe a fully informed decision on my part that may not be consistent with, where things are today. Does that make sense? Because that's been my issue, honestly.
Is that you have previous experience or previous knowledge about the organization, but you may not be directly connected to them now or to it now?
Right. It's more past.
Okay. Does anyone have any response to Paul's question? Or how does the committee feel about that? In that situation, should we also recuse ourselves? Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I think it gets challenging, right? Because if we're all experts in this field or at least experienced in this field, it gets very challenging because I would guess that all of us have, you know, some cursory knowledge of some of the applicants and things like that. So I think that, I don't know, it feels like that could get to be very slippery if we have any outside knowledge of an agency that we should recuse ourselves. It seems to me it's more about if there's any perception that you might benefit from that relationship that you have
Yeah.
with the organization, but that's my thought.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you, Karen. Let's go to Dawn. She has her hand up as well.
Yeah, I have the same issue. I did it in the small group. There were a couple of applicants that I did not score because of perceived conflict, but the problem was, at least with one of those applicants, I probably was the only one in the room that had the most knowledge about it and how it could benefit the community. So I felt like I had to recuse myself, but it also left potentially those applicants at a disadvantage. And one of the things, the ones that I did recuse myself from, they, with the other scores, did end up being like some of the top scores, but I didn't feel like I could still say anything unless asked when it came to discussion. So I do think we need some type of clarity as to how we're going to do this so that all applicants in some form can get a fair shot. Concern.
Thank you.
And I don't know how we do that.
Yep. I want to go to Commissioner Jacobs, and then we could talk about how do we do that? Like, is it a time limit? I mean, how do we want to approach this issue? Commissioner Jacobs?
Yeah, I would love to have Christy, the attorney, weigh in, but if we look at the, the policy that was referenced, that would not be grounds for recusing yourself. Related to what Karen said, it's related to like direct personal benefit. So, for instance, if you were on the board of an organization, or you would be receiving funding as a result of the decision, or you have a family member, a direct family member that is involved with the organization. But things like knowing, having information or things like that, I don't think any of us would actually be able to be on this committee. So, but if you look at the county's policy, that's not considered a conflict of interest. But I'd love to hear Christy weigh in on this issue.
And Commissioner Jacobs, I think you know this well. I think that's true. I think I appreciate Attorney Baxton's desire to put forward so that everyone can know what potential concerns could be. But if you look at the purpose of our code, it requires public officials and employees to be independent, impartial, and responsible to the people, and that governmental decisions and policy be made publicly, and public offices not be used for personal gain, which is not the situation here, and that the public maintain confidence in the integrity of its government. And then if you look at interest as defined in section 2 of our code, It is a direct or indirect pecuniary or material benefit as a result of an official act, a contract, or transaction with Durham County government accruing to a county official, anyone in his or her family, any business entity in which the county official, member of his or her family, or is about to be an officer or director. And then it goes on to talk about stock. So in the situation, without going into specifics about Attorney Baxton's situation, I think for everyone, it is true that you're serving on this committee because you have information about this world, and that's why you've been appointed here. And so I think the real questions need to be, will you benefit in decisions that are made right now? Or will someone in your family benefit financially, or potentially your employment? Possibly, I think disclosing it out front and letting, if anyone has a very clear belief that there is a conflict, have an opportunity to say that. But these decisions are supposed to be made on a personal level. Your assessment as to whether you can do this job impartially. I will note Section 4 has additional standards of conduct, and subsection D to that talks about county officials not accepting or engaging in private employment that would impact this. And so I think, perhaps there could be a consideration of how your employment impacts your judgment or performance here. And I think putting it out there is a good way to be sure that everyone knows that there could be a perceived conflict. But if an individual assesses there is no actual conflict of interest, then I think that's important to note. And I think it is true that if it's based entirely on your knowledge about something, then that would negate the purposes of having you on the board, or on the committee.
Thank you, Christy. And so, Paul, I saw you raised your hand again.
Yeah, I did. No, I appreciate that, Christy. And I actually interpreted everything the way you just described, through the policy. I think my question is maybe one with myself and not with you all. I don't know, which has to do with objectivity. And where does that fall into play? Because I think that was the tipping point for me, is I didn't feel like I could be fairly objective, with the opinions I hold based on the experience I had. And so that just seemed like a slippery slope. So I just thought I'd just be cautious.
Mhm. So it sounds like, again, looking at the policy, that is really based off of our own financial personal interests, or that of our family members, immediate family members. And so again, we're proposing to the group here that that when we do have, someone does have a potential conflict of interest based off of that standard, that you recuse yourself from participating in voting about that specific application or proposal. And so we want to make sure again that we all are in agreement about this proposed policy. So how does that sound to everyone? And then we could do like a voice vote.
Well, and if I could just be clear, the county's policy does apply to everyone here. So
Yep.
that's not up for vote. That actually
That's
applies
right.
to this committee.
Yep.
I just want to be clear about that. And
Yep.
I think it's important to note that obviously if someone on the committee is employed by one of these organizations that's
Mhm.
seeking funding, that would be a conflict of
Yes,
interest.
that's my
And the
comment.
person would need to not be involved in discussions related to it.
Okay. Everyone, okay. Do you want to do a voice vote? So we're voting on making sure that we're sticking to the county's policy, and that if someone does have a personal interest in an application, that they will not vote. Okay, let's go around and do like a voice vote. And also want to welcome Alonza to the meeting today. So let's start off with first.
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm sorry to interject one more time. I just want to be
Sure.
clear that I understand. Is this a vote to see if you want more stringent or more definition? Because it can't be a conflict of interest that's lower than the requirements of the county.
Yeah, I think it's just we want to make sure everyone is in agreement with it. So I don't know if we actually need a voice vote or what. We don't need one. Okay.
I mean, I think it's required. I think
Yeah, it's required.
everyone
Okay.
has to be. So if someone has a problem with it, now might be a good time to say that
Okay.
that it needs to be addressed. But otherwise, I think everyone who's appointed has to follow this.
Has to follow it. Okay.
Mhm.
Anyone have any other questions about the conflict of interest? Okay. So I'm going to go back to the agenda. So now we're at the point where we are going to look at the recommended applicants. This has been a process and we're hopefully near the end of it. And so to go through the actual recommendations, Brittany and I put together some slides. What we did to get to this point was, of course, we had everyone send in their recommendations last week. And then we sat down on Friday, Brittany and I, to just basically compile all the information. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing some of the slides. And then from there, we'll have a discussion, and then hopefully a vote on what the committee is recommending for the FY 27 funding. Where is this? Okay. Is everyone able to see the presentation? This is a very short presentation. Okay. Along with the process, several members, as you were turning in your recommendations, there seemed to be a consistent pattern about criteria and also consideration. So one thing we know that the funding for the collaborative strategic planning strategy is required. So everyone, of course, recommended that one. But also several members used the working group score to basically establish a minimum threshold of 80 in order to make their recommendations. There also seemed to be general consensus that maintaining funding for the FY 26 grantees was a priority for the committee. Additionally, some proposals did not receive recommendations because the services that were being proposed are fundable through other sources. Members did recommend partial funding to cover specific parts of proposals like payments for housing and to cover personnel. But also we realized, and also we had a discussion about this, but members need more information about specific strategies. And so we thought through this process, some of our learning priorities have possibly been identified. So there are some specific strategies where we just need more information, more understanding about what are the best practices around those strategies. So here we go. Basically, the members largely agreed on the following. We did not recommend FY 27 funds to go to 4 specific strategies. The first is employment-related services. That's because we did not have any applicants for that one. Also strategy 6, early intervention. There was support for the for one of the applicants try where we had 2 members wanted or recommended partial funding. 5 did not fund. There was also 1 recusal for that proposal. And then for activation of youth, I think the Way group, 7 of the group of our committee agreed not to fund that group or recommended not funding that group. Some of the comments around this specific strategy and applications were that the scores, especially around the Way group, was below the score threshold of 80. And also there was also another comment around the strategy just not being as impactful for people who use drugs. And that was just a lower priority strategy for this one specific committee member. Strategy 10, the Criminal Justice Diversion Program. For the Justice Services Drug Treatment Court, there was 1 committee member who recommended full funding for that proposal. 6 did not recommend funding, and then there was 1 recusal. And some of the comments included family court is a new program and a county priority. Also recommend funding through the general fund. And also there was a question that is the county making this a priority somewhere else within the budget? And then for strategy 12, for the reentry programs, there was also no qualified applicants for that specific strategy. Any questions or comments around these, around what's on this slide, around the strategies that were not recommended for funding for next year?
And can I interject one more time? I'm sorry to keep
Sure.
interrupting. Please forgive me for that.
No, it's fine.
I think it's important to note that in order to follow open meetings laws, votes have to be done in the open. And I see how the committee was attempting to take very large amount of information
Mhm.
and synthesize it so that you could use the time well.
Yeah.
But I think that it is important where you have indicated who, essentially this looks like a vote
Uh-huh.
or against a particular group. And I think that needs to be done on the record. So I
Okay.
would say if the committee would like to move forward with
Mhm.
this information, I think there needs to be a way for for example, starting with try, identifying the 2, the 5 and the 1, and then confirming that that's still the case. And if I see lots of hands up, so I can answer
Yeah.
questions, but I think the most important thing is any decisions, if you make a decision not to move forward with those, there needs to be a vote on the record for that.
On the record. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So
All right.
if others want to ask questions, I'm happy to try to answer
Sure.
them.
And then we want to definitely, and we do have a record of who voted on what, so we could definitely do that. But go ahead, Karen. I saw yours first. Your hand up first.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just wondering, I'm a big fan of transparency, so this is not meant to seem resistant at all. I'm just wondering if our comments and what we put into our spreadsheets could be entered into the record, or do we have to everybody go through all the parts of, because it was a lot of information. I just in
So
the interest. Yeah.
Yep, that's a great question. And I think that your documents that you submitted are part of public record that is available for people who request them. And I think you could attach it to the agenda as part of the meetings, but what I would recommend is that you just clearly vote openly now. If you want to vote to accept this entire, not document, but if you want to just start and go down the list and take a quick vote on each one, I think that could make it open and not necessarily require the extensive discussion about it. But I
Right.
do think the vote needs to be done in the open.
Okay. Dawn, I saw your hand up too.
My question was, how was this threshold of 80 decided?
I think that was based off from what I understand, folks used that from the working group's recommendation. They were just using 80, the score that the working groups provided about the applications as a threshold. It wasn't like a group decision. It was just some individuals decided to look at the recommendations from the working groups or the scores from the working groups, and they decided that 80 would be their threshold.
For one person, because it seems like this was what the small group used to come up with the review process, which wasn't something that this entire group agreed on.
Right.
It's a problem for me because it seems like a totally different process was established as opposed to what the small group did, which was score, and then whoever got the highest score was the one recommended. But it seems like a totally different process was done.
I wouldn't say it was a process. I think it was just some individuals within the committee just decided to establish a threshold. It wasn't like a group decision. It was folks just said below my score threshold. I'm not sure if someone who did decide to use that, if you could explain why you decided to use that strategy when you were going through recommending or through the recommendations. Yes. I think Karen just raised your hand. Did you want to say something in response to Dawn's question about the threshold?
Yeah, I'll just speak for myself. I didn't know if anybody else did this, but for myself, I really valued the input, the people who dug really deeply and read all of these applications. I did not do the deep, long process that that group did. And so um I personally used it myself in that I did not feel comfortable giving, myself recommending funding for some of those applications that were scoring in the 70s and below. But that's just to be clear, that was not done that was just how I based my personal recommendations when filling out the spreadsheet.
Dawn, do you have another question or follow-up about that?
No, I'm just on my prior opposition to doing this whole process again because I hear what you're saying, appreciating the deep dive and all this stuff, but it seems as though the hours, might I add, that was spent by your colleagues on the small working group that was requested, as we are sitting here again with totally different recommendations going forward, was totally ignored. And I'm going to be honest, I find that quite offensive and not appreciative of my time and efforts.
Thank you, and it's noted. Thank you so much. Commissioner Jacobs?
Yeah, and I'll just say this is a learning experience for all of us, and I know hopefully we'll have time after this this year's process to, for all of us to have input on what we've learned and how to strengthen it going forward. And I just want to point out that all those things are mentioned under comments. It's not anything, it's just comments that were picked up from applications, just to clarify that. But Christy, I was wondering, can we just say that this is a consent agenda related to strategies that will not be recommended for FY27 and do it together that way in interest of time? It's almost 1:00. I know our meeting only goes to 1:30 today.
I think that's fine. And it can be voted on that way if everyone agrees to that. I think if discussion is needed about whether these are the ones to vote on not being funded.
Okay, so I'm just, in the interest of time, I'm just going to make a motion to move forward that as a consent agenda, that strategy 5, 6, 10, and 12 will not be recommended for FY27.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Paul second. Okay, well, let's go ahead and do the vote. So we'll do a voice vote. Start with Brittany.
Yes.
Dawn,
No.
Dr. Carter,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Wendy. Oh, that's right, she made the motion, sorry. Lofton,
Yes.
Alonza.
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes as well. So it seems that the committee's agreed for us to have a consent. So we just, question to qualify, now do we need to, or to clarify, now do we need to vote to accept this as a consent, as a committee?
I think my understanding of the motion was that you were accepting this going forward, that this is where the committee is and that the committee has now accepted.
Okay.
But if I misunderstood that, someone could
No.
clarify.
No, this is education for me.
That's how I worded it,
Okay.
Christy.
All right. So the
Just in the
committee has
interest of
accepted.
time.
Okay. So the committee has accepted to do not recommend FY27 funding for the strategies that are listed on this slide. And so now I'll pass it to Brittany to continue sharing what the committee's recommendations are.
Yeah, so when we went through the worksheets that folks turned in, there was a lot of agreement, and we'll go into the details of this in the following slides. But it was very clear that folks were prioritizing strategy 1, collaborative strategic planning, strategy 7, naloxone distribution, strategy 8, post-overdose response teams, strategy 9, syringe services programs, and strategy 11, addiction treatment for incarcerated persons. And I will note there are a couple strategies still that we have not mentioned. Those are the ones that had a real mixed bag of votes. When Shalisa and I were going through these, we were thinking through what would be the most straightforward to review together, and that was the ones where we had the most agreement, and then turned to the ones where we had less agreement. So, Shalisa, do you mind going to the next slide? the collaborative strategic planning, someone mentioned it's required by the MOU. I think Shalisa mentioned that. We have to fund this to have the collaborative strategic planning process. This is Jason's role. We had 6 folks recommend for full funding, 1 person recommended for partial, and then 1 blank. But I don't know how y'all would like to do this. If we'd like to say, like, as a committee, can we consent to recommend this strategy? Okay, I would move that we do that.
I'll second that.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Were you asking for?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, Shalisa, do you mind doing the roll call?
Sorry, so go ahead, Brittany.
Yes.
Dawn,
No.
Dr. Carter,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Lofton,
Yes.
Alonzo.
Yes.
Okay, and I also vote yes.
Okay. Next strategy. Okay, was the naloxone distribution strategy. This had overwhelming support. The Department of Public Health proposal, there were 6 recommendations for full funding, 1 recommended partial funding, 1 left it blank. The comments on that were that folks wanted to folks had a priority of continuing existing public health harm reduction program, which included the partnership with more than 40 community organizations. Someone else said this is a priority project. Ending funding for a successful program would create a gap in much needed services. The only new line item this year was dues for $250, and there's a program this program is actively expanding and their client base is doubling. Then the other proposal in that category was from TRI. There were 5 members who suggested partial funding for that proposal. 1 recommended do not fund. There was 1 recusal and 1 person left it blank. And then the comments for that proposal were community-based harm reduction, yay, more naloxone, recommend partial funding if 2.2 million. Because if you will recall, we made recommendations based on if we had $1.5 million available and if we had $2.2 million available. I think we have a couple of options here. We could vote on the one that had no disagreement. Well, actually there was, some disagreement, full, partial, and blank, but we could vote on this and ask, like, do we all agree to recommend? Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, one question I have just about our process right now is, are we thinking about the 2.2 or the 1.5 situation? Because, some of these might be aligned depending on which column we were voting. In.
I guess it would be my recommendation that we consider both when we're looking at these. So we have 1 recommendation for if there's 1.5 and 1 if there's 2.2. And right now we could do that by saying, like, and without allocating like specific amounts in this like particular run through of these proposals. So if we recommend full funding in both scenarios, partial funding in both scenarios, or 1 scenario, whatever.
Right, because for me anyway, the partial was associated with the fact I was trying to line up the numbers and,
Yeah.
how
Does
much I
anyone
had to work
have?
with.
Yeah. Yes, Commissioner Jacobs.
Well, one thing is we could make a recommendation that we do $2.2 million worth of funding. That could be one of the votes that we take.
Okay.
So I'm happy to make a motion that we recommend that we allocate $2.2 million worth of opioid settlement funding for FY27.
Okay.
It's just a recommendation, but I why not? I mean, Christy, is that okay?
Sorry, I can't click fast enough. Yes, it is okay to recommend that you make that recommendation. And as Commissioner Jacobs just pointed out, ultimately the Board of County Commissioners will determine how to proceed, but you could certainly recommend to allocate that much.
Okay.
Okay, so I've made a motion that we recommend 2.2, as I said, $2.2 million worth of opioid funds be allocated for FY27.
I second.
I have someone ready, and it's about that recommendation.
Okay.
So I need to know, is this recommendation for the 2.2 million increase to simply fund the ones that this secondary small group has recommended go forward to the commissioners, or other programs? Because just doing a blanket increase without knowing what it specifically is going to be considered for or used for doesn't sit well with me. I don't like doing things in the blind.
Well, I can tie it to the overall I'll make the motion to tie it to the overall recommendations that come out of the Opioid Settlement Advisory Committee. So it's tied directly to the recommendations that come out of this committee. Does that address your concern?
No, it doesn't, because again, when we went through the second process, there were tons of programs and prior discussions about if the budget was bigger, then more, potentially all the programs could have been funded that had put in the application. So just to, again, limit it to what comes out of this committee without knowing exactly clearly what's coming out, I'm opposed.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll just to be clear, and then we can take a vote. I'll just amend my motion to that we recommend allocation of $2.2 million worth of opioid funds for FY27 to to fund the recommendations coming out of the Opioid Settlement Advisory Committee.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I'm sorry. Let Jamie has it.
Okay. So we'll do the roll call. So starting with Brittany,
Yes.
Dawn,
No.
Dr. Carter,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Lofton,
Yes.
Alonzo.
No.
Okay. Committee has agreed to make the recommendation. So Brittany, we still need the committee to vote on this, right?
So I think what I would recommend based on this is that we recommend funding strategy 7. We recommend full funding for the Department of Public Health and partial funding for the TRI proposal.
Do we have a second for the motion that Brittany just made?
I'll second that.
Okay. So now we'll do the roll call vote. So let's start the other way. Alonzo,
Yes.
Lofton,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Dr. Carter,
Yes.
Dawn,
No.
Brittany,
Yes.
and I also vote yes. So the committee has agree to recommend funding for the groups that are listed on this slide. Okay. Brittany, I think we have like what, one more slide, two more slides?
We have a couple more. Yeah, we
Okay.
have there's 3 more strategies that folks were recommending a lot of. So I think if we keep it moving, we good. Another one that folks overwhelmingly recommended were the post-overdose response teams. The Office of Emergency Services proposal was pretty overwhelmingly supported. There were 7 full recommendations for full funding and 1 blank. So essentially this was like mentioning that folks wanted to continue prioritizing the EMS support program, including peer support position and adequate supplies and medications. This is a priority project. Ending funding for a successful program would create a gap in much needed services. The addition of another community paramedic is critical, with the increased utilization rates as well as the expected changes in the drug supply, expected to increase morbidity, increase need for wound care and other low barrier healthcare. Priority to previously funded programs for continuation of services. The amount was based on, that was actually from my proposal. What I had recommended an amount based on like a later revised proposal, but so that was, folks were recommending full funding for that overall. TRI had another proposal here. There were 5 recommendations for partial funding, 1 recusal and 1 blank. And I believe there's like a problem with my count here because we actually had 8 folks. Let me just check. Oh, there was 5. That was the naloxone distribution. Okay, there were 2 blanks, 1 recusal, and then I'm actually not seeing the other recommendations for the port. So this is actually a typo. I can go through now if folks want.
Brittany, if I could just interject quickly, I think you're using the word vote when you say
I'm so
7
sorry.
people. I just want to be clear for the record that there was no vote. This is, you have compiled the totals from sheets where people individually scored, and those score sheets will be available to the public, and you are going to vote on that now in whatever way you choose to.
Correct. Yes, I'm so sorry. We did not vote. These are from score sheets. So the scores were there were 2 blank, 1 recusal, and then we had, let's see, 1, I'm just looking through the sheets right now. So 1 do not fund score, 1, 2 do not fund scores. 3 do not fund scores. Here's one of the blanks. Another blank. A do not fund. A recusal. And a do not fund. So overall, when we scored these individually, we scored it mostly as a do not fund for TRI and do fund for Office of Emergency Services.
So I have just a quick question. So are you saying, Brittany, that 5 partial should have said 5 do not fund?
Yes, I'm
Thank you.
very sorry. And it should have said 2 blank. Yes, Commissioner Jacobs.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, can you update that? Is it possible now to update that slide since it's incorrect? And it shouldn't actually have been on here as, okay. Thank you.
And 2 blank. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess I would move based on this that we do recommend funding the post overdose response team strategy. And under that, the Office of Emergency Services proposal.
Excuse me, I'll second that.
So we'll go ahead and do the voice vote. So Alonzo,
Yes.
Lofton,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Dr. Carter,
Yes.
Dawn,
No.
Brittany,
Yes.
and I also vote yes. Okay.
All right. So then the next strategy was syringe services program. Everyone who submitted a worksheet scored the Department of Public Health as a full funding under this strategy. And the comments included that this is a priority to continue the existing public health harm reduction program, and priority to previously funded programs for continuation of services. NCHRC, pardon me, was the other proposal under that strategy. There were 5 folks who scored it as a full fund, 1 who scored it as a do not fund, 1 recusal, and 1 blank. The comments all aggregated together were harm reduction as priority and had the highest score of 91. High priority project, expect to see increases in morbidity due to changing drug supply, need to focus on orgs led by folks with lived experience, need to support low barrier access to wound and other medical care. This was the highest scoring application. We recommend, or one person, I'm sorry, recommended full funding if we had the 2.2 million. Strong application, this amount of money. And then one person said this amount of money can be spent doing more to address the problem in the community. And that was the person who voted do not fund, or not voted, I'm so sorry, who scored do not fund. So with these in mind, I guess my motion would be to recommend that we prioritize. Oh, yes, Jason, I'm so sorry.
Yes. Hey, how you doing, Brittany? Just really quick question too here, because I can see that we're building out to votes based off the consensus from the sheets. And I know you're showing that the scores here, and I guess to like other points raised too, I don't think that this group actually made a decision that that scoring was going to be used for this. And also my other thing is too as well is does all the as a committee, do you guys also get the opportunity to vote individually for every applicant as well, or are you guys just taking the it's however y'all want to do it. I am seeing I'm having quite a few different concerns across how you guys are doing this. But it's perfectly fine. But once again, I think what I'm looking at is viewing you're pulling the consensus and then voting on the consensus that was actually preliminary. So, maybe Chrissy could add to this or someone else wants to add to this as well. But once again, that scoring that you see has from the working group hasn't been fully decided on, but it's also being used for certain applicants. So I'm just throwing it out there so we can have a clean, consistent approach to this. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah. Shalisa, I'm sorry. I realized that I'm like starting to do facilitating stuff, and that's you today. So if you want
That's
to.
okay. Let's go to Commissioner Jacobs first, and
Yeah, I
then
just wanted,
Dawn.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond again. It's 121. That, related to Jason's comment, again, that reference to the score is just in the comments that came off of people's sheets. And that was an individual choice that somebody may have made. And, the only information, and again, I agree with what Karen said personally. I didn't spend hours going over the applications the way the subcommittee did. And for me personally, I felt like, what is the point of that we had that process if that information was not going to be looked at and valued? So, that was the rubric that was used, the process that was used. And so, again, it's just some people put that in their comments. That doesn't mean that everyone used that for their decision making. And again, that was just one tool for decision making. And I don't think so. I personally, I just think it's important to emphasize that's just in the comment section that's being compiled, that were comments on people's recommendations. So, and I think that we could, if you, I mean, I think, let Christy weigh in, but I don't see any reason why we can't vote on these recommendations the way they're written here, but I'll let Christy weigh in.
I think if Attorney Baxton wants to speak first, go ahead, and then I can comment on all of it as needed.
Right. So my concern is, and why I've been voting no, is not to be contrary, but it just seems to me I don't have any confidence as to what process we use, at least with the small groups. We knew what the metrics were, what we were supposed to be looking at, and what we were supposed to be scoring and making a recommendation. This process, I personally feel totally in the blind. It feels like there was a subgroup within the subgroup who came up with the recommendations. Whether or not it happened that way, I'm telling you, it feels that way to me, that there was a small group that decided what they felt was a priority without any type of rubric that all of us worked in and scored the same. Like in the group, we all had a rubric or factors that we were supposed to look at and score from. I don't think that happened here. And so I'm uncomfortable just blankly voting on something when I don't know that a impartial, unbiased process was established that we had all agreed on was going to be used when we're back here doing this reviewing of the applicants for the third time, in essence, maybe four. So that's why you're getting no votes from me.
And Alonza?
So, after the, questions for concern, the concerns have been brought forward. I honestly, me personally, I would feel more comfortable we were, if we had everyone review the applications. I don't know if we're past that point, but I think that at this point, it needs to be a way that everyone can review those applications. And we go based off of the scoring of everyone. And also, even with the error, far as the number of scores on one of the previous votes, it seems like we also need to have someone tally them up, or have not or, but also have a person verify that they went back and tallied it as well, to make sure that there's no mistakes before we do any voting. Because after that, I kind of feel like, okay, well, about the past votes, they need to be double checked in if we're having this issue.
Yes, thank you. We do have the spreadsheet that contains everyone's recommendations and comments. Would that be helpful? I mean, we do have only about 4 minutes left before we were going to end the meeting, but um, I don't know if that would be helpful for this process right now. I mean, we've already kind of gone through about half of the recommendations, more than half, for funding and also do not fund. Christy, if you wanted to say something to respond to Wendy's comments or to Dawn's comments, I'm not quite sure. I'm feeling that I'm feeling that we probably want to do this, but I'm feeling that people probably want more additional information or Lofton. Yeah.
Sorry, Felicia, can I ask a clarifying question too
Yeah.
at this point? So Alonza, suggested everyone reviewing, all of the committee members reviewing the applications, and I'm trying to make sure that I understand. My understanding was that was the process that we just went
Yeah.
through when we did the scoring on the spreadsheet. I based that
Yeah.
off of reviewing the applications that were shared to all the committee members.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my
Yes.
understanding, that's the step that we just did.
That's what we did last week. Yes.
Okay, so I guess Alonzo, can you clarify what different additional step that you are recommending that we do?
So just to clarify, so the scores that were given that were on that spreadsheet, that wasn't from everyone, was it? That was just from the smaller committee, correct?
It was actually just individuals who established some threshold around how they were going to review the applications. So it wasn't a small group, it wasn't a group decision. It was just individuals who said, as I'm reviewing these proposals, I'm going to use 90 as my threshold. I'm going to use 80 as my threshold to make my recommendations. And
Gotcha.
so what you're seeing right here are comments that we just collect. The comments are from all of the spreadsheets. And so
Okay.
it wasn't like a group decision or a small group decision.
Okay.
Okay. And Dawn, I see your hand again. Go ahead.
Right. And what you just described is why I have a problem, because there wasn't one consistent process used for scoring as it was when the small group, interviewed the applications. We got multiple processes being used to make a recommendation, which to
Yeah.
me causes problems and
Yeah.
seems unfair and biased.
Yeah. So this committee did not have a rubric
That's my
about
point.
this.
That's
Yeah,
my
it was
point.
everyone making their own individual assessments.
Right. And that is the point, because I think the rubric helps you to, at least in some way, once you do the self-analysis, is whether or not you have a conflict and recuse. And then if you're looking at the application and you have a rubric, I think that gives you more of an unbiased, objective evaluation, whereas every person has their own independent rubric that they're using to recommend whether or not some should be funded.
Yeah. 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 So that is definitely something that we can work into the process for next year. I want to look at the chat real quick. Um, that is something that in hindsight we perhaps should have definitely discussed before we all did our reviews last week. And so yes, I think it's very important for us moving forward for next year's process that this group does come up with a very clear understanding and agreement about what are we going to use to assess proposals for funding. Um, but now that since we're
Excuse
already
me.
almost halfway through this process, I guess we need to just, would y'all want to continue or yes, Paul?
No, I was actually going where you are, which is I was just going to make a motion. We continue the process
Yeah,
as we've already done it.
yeah. And I do agree with what Commissioner Jacobs said before. I think it'd be great for this group to have a debrief of this process so that we're clear about the next time that we go around. So I guess we need right now a recommendation for or a motion for the group to accept the recommendation for um, the funding recommendations that you see now on the slides. I'm trying to be careful with my language, but
So I make a motion that we as the committee recommend the strategy of syringe service programs, and we recommend full funding for the Department of Public Health and full funding for North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition.
do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, that was Alonzo. Okay. So now let's go through the roll call. Um, and remember, we're also supposed to be applying our conflict of interest because anyway. So I'll start with Alonzo.
I second the motion. So
Oh, we're doing the vote right now.
okay, yes.
Okay. Lofton.
I have a conflict of interest, so I recuse myself.
Okay. Thank you. And Paul,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Dr. Carter,
Yes.
Dawn,
No.
Brittany,
Yes.
And I also vote yes. And so I think we have one more slide, or is this the last slide? Let's see. Actually, I'm the one that has that. So let me go. Go ahead, Brittany.
Yes, so the other one that had overwhelming or overall support in the scoring by all committee members was the Strategy 11 addiction treatment for incarcerated persons. That was the Department of the Sheriff proposal. There were 6 folks who scored it for full funding, 2 for partial. People's comments on their individual scoring sheets included priority to continue funding for the jail MAT program, crucial, continuing MOUD in jail. Don't see a budget for this though. Is there any indication they'd be expanding? Also curious about the FY26 evaluation. And that was my comment, and I don't have reservations about moving forward with this, with that. Yeah.
Do we have a motion to accept the recommendations on this slide?
I make that motion.
Okay, a
I'll
second?
second.
Okay, Karen. Okay, now we'll do the roll call again. So we'll start with Brittany,
Yes.
Dawn,
No.
Dr. Carter,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Lawson,
Yes.
Alonza.
No.
No, okay. And I also vote yes. So it looks committee has accepted the recommendations. And then that was it.
So there are 2 strategies that we did not discuss because the scores were all over the place. And when Shalisa and I had compiled these, we had anticipated more time for discussion. I'm sorry, there are 3 strategies we did not discuss. And I am curious. I'm so sorry, y'all. I have a migraine today, so my brain is not really very on point. But if there are any thoughts, given that we are now 4 minutes over, about how to move forward with those.
So I guess if we look back at what we've already recommended and we recommended, we look at kind of the full funding amounts, essentially more, ballpark for the strategies and organizations that we've recommended. I guess if there is funding left over in the 2.2 million budget, then maybe we still do need to discuss those other strategies. But if there's not funding left over, then maybe we're done.
I do want to add, I know I said this at the beginning, but I just want to say it again for anyone who's watching, that these scoring sheets that were used will be attached to the agenda and uploaded onto the website so that they're made available to the public.
So I heard the recommendation or the proposal from Dr. Carter that maybe we need to do is look at the amounts for the agreements that or the recommendations we've made today. And then if there is a need, if there's leftover funding, maybe we look at the ones that received recommendations that were mixed, where there was not a clear consensus from the group. Is that something that we would like to do at our next meeting?
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Yes.
It's hard to move forward if we don't know how much, if any, money is left.
Okay. Other recommendations for our next meeting agenda. I know we said we also should do a debrief of this process. Would that be something else that the group would like to have or the committee would like to have on our next agenda?
Hey,
Yes.
Shalisa, not to interrupt you guys' meeting, but I will need to have everything in terms of recommendations by May the 1st,
Okay.
just due to our internal county processes as well. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm hearing a debrief of the process.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So can we get a motion to adjourn today's meeting?
I'm sorry, do we have a time for when we're getting together again before May 1st?
Oh, before May 1st?
It sounds like that's what we need to, if I'm understanding it right, that's what we need to do in order to get Jason what he needs in time. Is that correct?
Yes. So that would mean sometime later on this week. Um, yes, Wendy. Go ahead.
I just want a clarification. Jason, what exactly do you need from us other than what we just did today? Could you
Yeah, Commissioner.
clarify?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would actually just need the recommended applicants and also the amounts that are associated with those. And in the spreadsheet, there was a good bit of a range. So if you guys could just kind of get some sort of consensus of what that number looks like. And even if it is a range, that's fine too. I would like for you guys to dial it in so that way I can have the specific recommendation across that. And the reason why we do that is because because it's so restricted, we have to authorize by strategy. And so we need to make sure I have the strategy and then also the applicants there. So if you can have these are the applicants we recommend and the amounts for that one, that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you, Jason.
Yes,
So I
ma'am.
guess I'm asking Shalisa and Brittany as the co-chairs, if you could go through and put that together. And then Jason set a range. So based on what everyone put on their recommendations, I guess if you could take like the bottom amount and the top amount, would that be a range, a good enough range, Jason?
I mean, honestly, like, this is the first time for, myself doing this with this. The previous time we've had exact amounts because it was just staff recommendations. So, I mean, we will need an exact amount just from like internal budget perspectives. Like, they're not going to accept the range, but
Okay.
but
All right.
if you guys want to give I'll follow you guys' lead. If you guys want to
All
give me
right.
recommendations, hey, Jason, figure it out between the
Okay.
range, I can do that. Or if you guys want to give me a specific amount, I'll take that as well.
All
Yeah.
right. I guess the other option would be for Shalisa and Brittany for you to go through and you come up with a recommendation because I just think there's this kind of group, it's going to take forever
Yeah.
unless we have something to respond to, kind of like we did today, especially with the May 1st deadline and considering that May 1st is Friday. So anyway,
Yeah. And we have the information on the spreadsheets about what everyone recommended as far as the funding amounts. So how would y'all like for us to share that information back to you? Would you just want us to send it in an email, or would we like to get together again this week? I mean, May 1st is Friday, and I know that when we were trying to find time for this meeting, that it was pretty difficult for us to figure out that. So how would y'all like for us to share the information around the budget ranges?
I guess I think I was thinking that we had voted to recommend full funding for a lot of the organizations. And so I think that full funding would be kind of a clear amount. And then only one organization we recommended partial funding so far. And then I think just depending on if there's anything left over in the 2.2 million budget, it will definitely be over the 1.5 million budget at this point.
Yeah.
And we might need to recommend partial funding for some other organizations as well if we are able to meet and discuss that. But I think those would be the things that we would still need to discuss, would be like, what does partial funding look like for the one organization we already recommended, and what partial funding could look like for any of the other strategies that are where there was less consensus. But yeah, I think maybe just looking at the full funding amount, the full funding request, I think we voted to recommend that
Okay.
for the majority.
And recommend, how would y'all like for us to share this information? Do you want to get back together again? Or should we just do this? Is it possible for us to do this via email? And I'm asking Christy if that's possible. I'm not sure because
You cannot
hard.
vote
Yeah,
via email.
email, that's right. So we would have to get back together sometime again this week. Would it be possible, Jason, is there a specific time on May 1st that you need the budget numbers?
Just by close of business, so around 5 p.m. that day.
Okay.
And probably even honestly beyond that, we work a little bit past that. So
Yeah, yeah,
whenever you
yeah.
can get it to me, well, that's fine.
I know that last time we were trying to find a time for this date, Friday was not one of the dates that we asked, that we considered. Is Friday, would it be possible for us to get together for just maybe 30 minutes on Friday at some point to look at the budget numbers and then have Jason send them to Jason or share them with Jason?
I can tell you I won't be present. I'm at a conference
Okay.
out of town.
What about other folks? Or if there's another day too between now and Friday. I know Thursday I'm not available.
Okay, so maybe let vet a couple Tuesday, Wednesday options and see how we fall out. Or you all do Friday if you can do Friday.
Okay. Friday, early afternoon. I don't see many reactions. Okay, Alonzo, it works for you Friday afternoon. Brittany, I know
Friday.
some folks are still looking on their calendars. Jamie, Dr. Carter. Um, Lofton. What about Friday, 1 p.m.? Okay. So we will reconvene Friday, 1 p.m. To share the budget ranges, and then we'll go from there. Yes, and we will try to limit to 1 hour again. In fact, yes, definitely. 1 to 2. Okay. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll offer that one.
Okay. A second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, everyone. All right. Everyone. Oh, we have to do, I guess, one by one again. So let's go one by one. Roll call vote. Brittany,
Yes.
Dawn,
Yes.
Dr. Carter,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Lofton,
Yes.
Alonzo.
Yes.
Okay, and I also vote yes. So thank y'all so much. See you all on Friday afternoon.
Thank you, Shalisa.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.